It is 3 and we can get going. So again, for anybody who missed our introduction, I am Jane Hauser and I'm the Director of Marketing and Outreach for NESCA. And I am joined by Stephanie Monaghan-Blout and Yvonne Asher. Thanks so much again for being with us. Just wanted to clear up a couple of housekeeping items. If you are having any kind of technical difficulties, please feel free to use the chat functionality at the bottom of your screen. If you are interested in submitting a question for Stephanie and Yvonne to answer at the end of the session, please use the Q&A feature. So with that, I will turn it over to Stephanie and Yvonne to introduce themselves further. Thanks again.
So, hello all, and thank you for being here. Jane, I don't see my picture up. Is that okay?
Yep, I think it's fine.
Okay, good. So I'm going to be going blind here. Thank you so much for being with us today on this really rainy, cold, lousy day. Probably like many of you at home, you have little things like dogs running through here. Hopefully my dog isn't going to be around, but if you hear a whining, that's what it is. So I am a neuropsychologist at NESCA. I am one of the senior people. I come about this interest in ADHD from both a professional and a personal reason. I was for many years an adolescent and family therapist, and then I decided to study and go back to neuropsychology. And part of that was because I had children, and 2 of my 4 children turned out to have ADHD. So I consider myself a survivor. I'm far away from it now that I can laugh at a lot of it. So I'm going to probably ask you guys to laugh along with me. Maybe you can, it always helps to get a little bit out of our heads out of the weeds when times are tough. And they can be really tough with kids with ADHD. So I'm now, as I said, I was a neuropsychologist. I'm actually going to be going back now and doing some more therapy as with the COVID crisis. So that'll be kind of interesting to me. And I am one of the places that I have dear in my heart are parents who are trying to manage this whole ADHD situation. So, Yvonne?
Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us today. My name is Yvonne Asher. I'm one of the junior neuropsychologists here. Things and came to be really interested in neuropsychology as a way to help kids who are really struggling. Think together today and some other things. So more than happy to talk about that. And if anyone has questions about that.
Okay, I'm going to, so I'll go on. So I want to start out by discounting the bad seed theory of ADHD. And I am referring to those dark thoughts that you have in your mind as a parent of a child with ADHD about how did this happen to me? And I think it's really important to start with that because you can feel really alone and kind of crazy when you get in one of those places. And the 2 pieces of that question really is of the bad seed theory. And of course that was, I don't know, there was a movie or something like that about, some kid who was born into the world and he was like really very strange and evil. Children are not born into the world strange and evil. But some kids are more challenging than other kids to parent and their behaviors are more extreme. And I think we're going to talk a lot about that. And then the second piece of that is what did I ever do to get a kid who acts like this? And again, this is not karmic payback here. It wasn't something you did wrong in this life or another life. And it wasn't that you're a terrible parent. So it's possible that most of us, you fell into some parenting methods that really don't work for this child. And again, we're going to talk about that as well. So the truth of parenting a child with ADHD is that it is really, really hard. And I think if you can remember, or probably I can remember, but it may be closer to many of you, is that the meltdowns in the supermarket. And you always remember like before you had kids and you're walking by and some kid was pulling an absolute horror show. And the kind of judgmental thoughts that you had about the parent who was dealing with that. And my feeling these days is when I I've made a promise to myself when my kids were doing that if I got through this and I ever saw that happen, the first thing I was going to do was walk up to the parent and say, can I do something to help? Can I put your cart in the line? Can I do something for you to make this easier? Because it's just so hard to have this all happen in the great public, and everybody sort of gives you those kind of looks. And I think it leads to the challenging behaviors that often elicit our most effective responses. Like most of us know, it's probably really not a good thing to yell, but that doesn't mean we don't yell. It doesn't mean that we don't get really stressed out. We go at the top of our lungs in a way that's not really helpful to sort of yell. And now I'm from an Italian-American family, so we're kind of loud anyways. And I think, what's the big deal about yelling? What you have to also remember is that we're big, kids are small. When we yell, it's a lot louder for little kids, and it's a lot scarier than it may be as adults. So again, what happens with the yelling is that, you know, the kids go into they become very anxious and they go into fight, flight, or fright, and they don't hear a word you have to say. The other thing that I remember very dearly as a parent of an ADHD kid was that I would get into making threats that there's no way I would either want to or could possibly carry through on. Like, if you don't get off that roof right now, you'll never be able to go out to play again, or something to that effect. And, you know, of course, the problem with making threats that you can't keep is that people don't believe. That I remember the things that were my personal favorites when I was being ineffective as a parent. The other thing that's really hard with kids with ADHD is the family and friends who offer well-meaning critiques and advice. Like, if you're just, you know, more strict with the kids, or all you really need to do is this, or you should read this book, or whatever. And the fact is, you've already tried that. If it was that easy, you would have done it, you know. And it doesn't work with this particular kids. And all it does is make you feel worse. And then you stop talking, you know, all your friends are talking about their kids, and you can't talk about your kid because they're not really doing all the things that everyone else's kid is doing. Or people don't want to be around you anyways because your kid's really difficult. And I think the other thing that I don't think people talk about enough is just the challenges of co-parenting are really, really tough to begin with. We all come from different family backgrounds, different family styles. Our parents did things really different ways. So when we go to our atlas of things that we can do as a parent, we're not accessing the same pages. And it's just, and these kids will make you have to be thinking on your feet all the time because they're always keeping you moving. It's really, really hard to not sort of turn on your partner and say, if you're just too hard, too soft, too inconsistent, too unavailable, too available. The range of criticisms that we can offer to each other and on each other are infinite, and it's extremely difficult. I don't think people appreciate just how hard it is. I think maybe parents who have kids who have other significant disabilities may appreciate that, but for many people, it's like, are you guys always fighting all the time? So, and I think the other thing that we don't really spend enough attention, or we don't think about enough, is the cost of what it feels like to always be doing the wrong thing at the wrong time. And I'm talking about children here. And when you think about when kids don't pay attention to where they are, what they're supposed to be doing, when they distract themselves and distract others with their fidgety behavior, when they don't stop and think before they're saying or doing something, what are they most likely to hear? And what comes out of our mouths as parents with these kids, it's no, don't, stop. Those are some of the better things we say. And then all too often from somewhere these kids also hear bad, stupid, weird. And we'd just like maybe even just sort of do an exercise someday of, you know, when your kid is really sort of stressing you out, just keep track of all the times that you say those negative kind of things in one day and just sort of add up. And then think about, what does it feel like for the kid that everyone's always saying negative stuff about them? And why are we surprised that kids with ADHD don't like themselves and they feel that the world is against them? One of the most it's a diagnosis I really, really hate, but it's called oppositional defiant disorder. And that's the kid who's always not doing what they're supposed to be doing. No, you can't make me, and I don't want to, and all that kind of stuff. But when we think about how often these kids are being criticized or are being told negative things about themselves, in some ways almost that way of sticking, that defiance that they stick up for themselves, is sort of a sign of saying, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. How about me? You know, what's wrong? What's so wrong with me that I have a feeling that I want to do X, Y, or Z? Okay. So, Yvonne, you want to go on?
Yeah, definitely. So I wanted to just take a moment, and this may be familiar to some of you, it may be new, but I wanted to talk for a moment about what we think of ADHD as kind of as neuropsychologists. And you may get a different answer if you asked a psychiatrist, like a medical professional, or someone who is just doing therapy. But this is how, from a neuropsychological perspective, we think about ADHD. So we categorize it as a big word that has these two kind of really important components. So the neuro part, meaning that we think of ADHD as having a biological or neurological piece. So there's something about kids' brains that is different. So that, hopefully takes away kind of what Steph was saying, hopefully takes away some of the blame or guilt feelings, because we think that this is just kind of how their brains are wired. And the developmental part comes into play with a bit of a gap, right? So we see that in some ways, kids with ADHD, most of them, their brains are developed just fine, right? Your kid may be getting fine grades in school or may seem perfectly smart, right? And somebody maybe has tested your kid and said they're very smart. And that's a big part of your brain. But there's this other part of your brain up here that governs this kind of self-control, attention, your ability to stop yourself from doing something. We call that your kind of prefrontal cortex. And for kids with ADHD, we think of that part of the brain as being delayed in how it develops. So it creates this contrast where we may have a very smart kid who just cannot pay attention, cannot stop themselves from doing things they shouldn't be doing. And that can be extremely frustrating, both for the kid, but also for their teachers, their parents, their friends, their siblings, because they may look like a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old or an 11-year-old, and their behavior may be that of a much younger child. One of the reasons that happens is because this ability to control ourselves, to regulate our behavior, is a maturity, right? That's like what we colloquially call being mature. So, we don't expect a 2-year-old to control their behavior. We expect them to act, like a 2-year-old, and that's fine, and we forgive that. But when you have a 2-year-old ability to control their behavior, but they're actually 9 years old, we don't forgive that as much anymore. And that starts to look to us to be really problematic.
And really difficult. I want to just also point out something I agree with parents when especially when you're having those deep, dark thoughts. Most of our kids, about a third of kids sort of grow out. We think ADHD, and the rest of them kind of calm down some. Most of them calm down, and this part of the brain is beginning to kick in. But also because sometimes it's because much more internal. I can do, again, from experience, I have 4 really wonderful kids, and the ADHD kids are just as wonderful and just as fantastic as the ones who don't have it. I think that's the experience of most people. It's these kids have the potential of really growing up to be really wonderful contributors to the community with their developmental.
Yeah, and I think just seeing kids year to year, as a teacher, we definitely see that, right? We'll see a kid come back in September, and probably what happened is that their brain just matured, and we're noticing it because of that gap. So definitely rest assured.
Yeah.
So in terms of the kind of characteristics of ADHD, we diagnose it with 3 different symptoms primarily. So one is inattention, and that's pretty simply your ability to kind of sustain focus. We'll often hear words like they're so distractible, they can't get anything done, they can't work, they can't remember to do things. We'll talk about that more in a second. Impulsivity. So we talk about about that as sort of the ability to inhibit or stop the impulses. And then impulsivity is when you can't do that, right? So inhibition is the good thing, and then impulsivity is the lack of inhibition, or you're doing things without being able to stop yourself. And then lastly, we have the hyperactivity, which is those kids who are just bouncing around everywhere all the time, jumping, crashing, taking things, breaking things, and we'll talk about what that kind of looks like at home. But most of the time we see that for kids, one of the symptoms, sometimes one or two of the symptoms, are the most problematic, are really, really difficult for a kid. And then oftentimes there's one or two of these symptoms that don't really apply to a specific kid. So your child may have all three of these, just one or two of them. Hopefully we're going to be able to address all different profiles. All right, so what does inattention look like at home? So like I was saying, inattention is the lack of ability to kind of focus, and particularly to keep your brain focused where it needs to be focused. So in fact, most kids with ADHD have really great attention for very, very specific things. So your kid may be able to play a video game for like 3 hours. I've met kids who, met a kid one time who loved sneakers. They could research sneakers for like hours on end, super focused, knew everything about them, right? NBA stats, something like that. But the problem is that when they have to focus their brain on something else, right, then we can't keep focused and we get super distracted. And so what I hear when we're doing evals with parents whose kids have ADHD is this: how can you not remember to, right? Like, you're supposed to do it every day. How is it not that you can't remember to make your bed, or you can't remember to put your shoes on, or you can't remember to do, to empty the dishwasher every night? You're supposed to do it. And the reason is because their brains are often not focused in the present moment. Their brains are somewhere else. And so these routine activities, like, you may be aware and remember to do all those things, but their brains just can't stay in the present moment. And then the other thing that I think can be really, really challenging is kids have a really hard time with directions, with following directions. And so part of the reason that happens is because, if your brain is constantly shifting off and shifting away, you miss all of the directions or some of the directions. And so in order to, combat some of these things, a lot of what we'll do is try to make sure that the information either gets into the kid or is somewhere else, right? So one of the difficult things is that when we give a verbal direction, you say it and then the words are gone, right? They're not there for the kid. So if they missed that direction, then that's it. They don't know what to do anymore. So we try to have these visual reminders, like a poster up or a checklist or something like that. And that way they don't have to hear in the moment, right, that they were supposed to make their bed. They can just look at the wall and remember, oh, right, I was supposed to make my bed. The other thing we can do is really try to recruit their attention before we give them a direction. So saying like, hey, Johnny, like, look at me. Okay, ready? And then give them the direction. A lot of times that's really difficult because if we're busy doing 10,000 things at home, it's really easy to be in the middle of washing dishes or changing a diaper or whatever, and just sort of, go get your stuff ready. And that is very likely for a kid with ADHD to lead them to not do the tasks, right? To not do what you asked. Yeah, go ahead, Seth.
I was just saying about the remembering how to do stuff. When I started to do neuropsychology, I was having this explanation with a client, and all of a sudden he started doing this. I don't know if you guys can see me. I'm patting myself. And I went, oh my God, this guy is really weird. What's going on? And he said, when I was a kid, I could never remember how I would always forgot something on my way out to school. I just always forgot it. It was my pens or my glasses or my books or whatever. And so he said, every time I got to the front door, I did my routine: hat, glasses, pens, book, and he had a wallet, and he would just do this whole kind of patting thing. And it was like, wow. What a really good idea. He built a routine for himself. And every time he saw the stimulus at the door, he did the routine. And it was such a great lesson for me about, oh, wow, what a cool, great thing to teach, to teach your kids. Do a routine. If it has to be a mnemonic or something, you know, like how you did PEMDAS and stuff, my Aunt Sally or whatever that thing is. Those kinds of routines can really be helpful for kids, help focus them on what they're doing.
Definitely, for sure. All right, let's try
switch.
Yeah, let's switch it up. Okay, so we have our Calvin and Hobbes here characters. So impulsivity, I think, can be one of the most frustrating and challenging symptoms for parents and for kids. And the reason is because that ability to kind of stop yourself from doing something is what we rely on all the time, like all the time. And it really keeps us sane as adults, right? It keeps us from actually saying the thing that we know we shouldn't say, but kind of want to say. And when kids are impulsive, they don't have that ability. And so, impulsivity comes with a lot of regret and a lot of shame for a lot of kids, because they didn't want to say that. They wanted to stop themselves, but they just can't. They just can't do it. Let's see. So what does it look like at home? So in general, behaving without the ability to think through the consequences. So we're not stopping and thinking. And stop and think is the kind of term that often used when we're trying to teach inhibition to kids. We're trying to teach them so to have kids that will just grab at things, just kind of take what they want. Sometimes I'll have parents that will characterize it as stealing or taking in a kind of more malicious way. And sometimes I think that can be very
Yvonne, we can't hear you. Mm-mm.
Stephanie, do you want to go back to the slide and just see if we can address it while...
I can't hear. Can you hear her?
No, I think she's frozen. If you can possibly take over.
We're going to try to... can you hear me now? Okay. So Yvonne got frozen, so I'm going to take over until she gets herself unfrozen. So impulsivity, as she said, she was talking about the fact that sometimes their behaviors can look like sort of malicious, like moral, quote unquote, issues of like stealing and cheating and things like that. And again, a lot of times it's I wasn't thinking, it's like the Calvin and Hobbes things, my mouth opens before I think, or they're not thinking it through what the consequences would be. I think that's why giving kids do-overs is like a mulligan can be really, really helpful, because they have to stop, think, what did I do that got me in trouble? And then they can fix it. And then, you know what? They're done. They don't have to feel guilty or bad or ashamed or defensive of what they just did. They fixed it. I think the other thing is the interrupting is really a huge, huge issue for a part of impulsivity, and it's certainly one of those maddening things that we as parents have to deal with, especially when you're trying to do work at home, for instance, and you want to make sure it's like one thing to have the dog walk through, but then the kids start yelling in the background about they want to put the tomato soup on and how they do that and stuff like that. And it's like, how many times do I have to tell you to leave me alone when I'm on the phone? And again, some of the things that can be helpful with that is that, either put a stops. I mean, I was telling that one of the things that one of my son's teacher did, he's a soccer coach, and he did a really great job with the kids in his classroom. For fourth grade, what he did was he ran, it was kind of like a soccer like game. So he had yellow cards and red cards. And so yellow cards is when you do something you're going to get a warning for, and red cards is you're really screwed up and you might have to sit down or whatever. And if a kid was doing something they weren't supposed to be doing, he would just put a yellow card on the table. So they would say they weren't paying attention, and the kid would go, oh, what am I doing here? And they would start self-monitoring, which is a really important executive function. So, oh, I'm not paying attention to what I'm supposed to be doing. Or if they just knocked over another kid's book, they might get a red card or something. But in any case, it was a way of giving kids some feedback about what they're doing without sort of bringing attention to everybody else in the whole wide world and making a big deal of it. So at home, it might be having you're on, going to do work calls, to have a stop sign, a little posted stop sign, or I think one of the other things that one of the lessons that we can also do to teach our kids is we can work with them together, like sit down, not when we just happen, when everybody's calm, and have a conversation about, I noticed that it's really hard for you when I'm on the phone and you need something, it's really hard for you to remember not to interrupt me. Is there a way, could we have a sign? Could we have a symbol that was going on? So maybe it would be, maybe it'll be like a yellow card or a red card. Maybe it'll be something else from sports or some other family joke that you have. Together, you're sort of trying to get the kid to think about the situation anyways, and together you come up with the signal so they're not feeling so blamed again.
Yeah, I think that's really great. And I'm sorry, my internet cut out there for a minute, but when I had taught in schools, we would often do that, pull kids out and sort of come up with a system for them that works. And the really nice thing is it gives them that sense of ownership over their behavior, which really combats some of that cycle of feeling shamed and upset and guilty and whatever. So I had a kid that wanted paper clips. I don't know why he wanted paper clips, but he really liked them. And so, every 5 minutes that he was participating in class, not interrupting, sitting nicely, and he doing all the good things, I'd give him a paper clip. And that was super helpful. He felt really empowered and he behaved, his behavior improved, not like dramatically, it's not like a magic pill, but, steadily over the rest of the year. So really working collaboratively together, I think can be a really powerful tool in helping kids feel like they can own some of the change that you're wanting to see. All right. So hyperactivity, those are kiddos who are just all over the place all the time. They have a really hard time managing and controlling their bodies. And like Steph had said, this is one of the things that I often see that dissipates around adolescence or, a little bit older, that kids can become much less hyperactive. But when they're little, when they're young, it can be really, really challenging, especially when we're stuck at home so much. And when we may have, far fewer resources to get them outside, to get them running and jumping and doing all those things that we know can help with hyperactivity. So, some things that we can do, certainly, if you're able to get your kids outside at all, that's, I think, the best thing is just burning off some of that energy. But the other thing we can do is we can have like a list, and it can be a list that's written for kids who can read, or just a list of pictures. And the things that they can do with their hands or with their body that will be not disruptive and also will help them get out some of that energy. So if you have like string or lanyard and your kid knows how to do those like keychains or whatever they do at summer camp, we can try that. Some kids try in the kind of occupational therapy world, they'll talk about like heavy work, so really physical work like push-ups or sit-ups or wall sits or things like that, something that really uses a ton of muscles. That can be really helpful to get some of that energy out. If your kid can make a paper chain to stretch across the block, I don't know, anything that they can do with their hands. And what's nice is if you post that list, then you don't have to always have the conversation, right? You don't always have to be the one who's saying, okay, please stop jumping, please go do this, please stop this. You can just kind of point to the list and, say, pick a thing, go for it, try it out. And again, that can break up some of that cycle of feeling frustrated by the hyperactivity.
I think those little we'll go on. I'll get back to it. Okay.
All right. So switching a little bit to talking about kind of education and homeschooling and school schooling. So, when kids are at school in their typical classrooms, there's a lot like radical differences, right, between your home and school, and these are some of the most important ones in terms of kids with ADHD being able to manage. And so one of the biggest things is that schools are super structured, and after a kid has been in school for a year, maybe less, even if that's preschool, they learn really quickly what the structures are, right? There's a teacher, there's a schedule, there's a list of things that we're going to do today. There's a goals for learning, right? There's activities that we do to demonstrate. And this structure is super, super beneficial for kids with ADHD. It's consistent. A lot of the expectations remain year to year and setting to setting, whether they transition to preschool, middle school, elementary school, right? And a lot of the expectations in school are around behavior. And when we have that kind of big structure of a classroom with other kids and teachers, and everyone's reinforcing the same behavior, right? Everyone's expected to behave the same way, and then everyone has the same kind of consequences. That predictability is also really, really beneficial for kids with ADHD. And those are things that we find to be, we can rely back on as teachers. We can kind of fall back on, like, well, I'm the teacher and that this is how we do it at school. And so we find that can be really, really important because it takes away a lot of the relational piece, right? It's not me fighting with you. It's me telling you that we're in school. We don't behave that way in school. And that's definitely not something that's true at home. Home has to be a more relaxed place because that's where you live, right? That's by definition. Your house can't be as structured as school. So that's one piece of it. And then the other piece that, that we find that can be really helpful is for kids with ADHD, there's a nice hierarchy, right? They kind of know where they fall in line. And what they want to do, what, almost all kids want to do is fit in with their peers, right? They're here with their peers, and there's the teacher, and then there's the principal, and right. And they want to be part of that cohort. And so what you get is a lot of kids that will kind of monitor each other's behavior and reinforce the good behaviors and sort of get rid of the bad behaviors. So like when I used to teach, I taught 5th grade a lot. It was my favorite grade to teach. And I didn't like screaming at the kids. I didn't like yelling because it made my voice hoarse and it didn't go anywhere. And so I would just wait quietly. I would just stand in the front of the classroom and wait until they were quiet before I gave directions or, introduced the next assignment. And what happens like really quickly is they start screaming at each other, right? Like, shut up, she's trying to teach. Oh, she's waiting. Can't you see? She's trying to talk, whatever. And you don't have to say anything, right? You just sit there and they all, right? They tell each other what the expectations are. And you can't do that at home, right? You don't have that group of kids to kind of monitor and fix each other. And so it's really relying on you as the parent to get everything set up for learning in a way that at school you don't have as much reliance on that. So let's go to the next. Okay. Yeah, so in contrast, right, when we're teaching at home, it's a multifunctional household, right? It's not a setting that they kind of walk into and immediately know that that's for learning. It's just where they live. And they have to be more comfortable by definition. And so that piece of home is both, relaxing and supportive and wonderful, and also makes the learning part really difficult because we don't have all of the structures that we can fall back on that kids have known for, right? If you have a kid in 5th or 6th grade, they've probably been in school for half their lives or more at this point, if they went to a year or two of preschool. And so, being able to rely on those structures is really, really helpful, but we can't do it right now with that. So we have to figure out ways that we can shift the home around at least enough, or at least in some contexts, to be a little bit more like school, although we certainly can't do that to a large degree, but we have to take out some of this multifunction piece and make one of the functions a little bit separate, at least for kids with ADHD. It may be helpful for all of your kids, but for kids with ADHD, it's really important to cue their brains that this is learning time, and it's different than, fun time, playing time, video game time, whatever that is. And they're going to rely a lot on that external cue of you're walking into school, so we need to help them walk into some context at home that will get their brains ready for learning.
Okay.
So that's kind of what we're doing, right? With these remote educational settings, is we're trying to do that, right? We're trying to have education happening in a context that isn't specified for it. And that's a really difficult thing, I think, that we're all finding right now. And, you know, I think this is very new for a lot of people. It's new for a lot of teachers, it's new for a lot of parents, it's new for a lot of kids. Maybe, you know, it's possible you took like a distance learning class as an adult, but outside of the kind of college setting, you know, we haven't used a lot of virtual modalities to try to learn. So figuring out what we can do at home to connect virtually in a meaningful way with a teacher or with some kind of instruction is going to be really difficult. And for, you know, for every, you know, district, every school, every classroom, it's going to be different what the expectations are and what resources are available from your child's school. So some schools are going to have these, you know, Zoom classes or meetings. Some are just handing out, you know, pieces of paper, you know, or packets or worksheets. But either way, we're trying to bridge that gap. And in order to do that, we have to really condense everything that's happening, right? A school day has social time built into it. A school day has transition time very intentionally built into it. And school days have all kinds of discussion and group activities for kids to learn together. And we're kind of taking all of that out during this homeschool time and really focusing on just the child and the content. And so that's, you know, it's squishing down all of the expectations, and then also relying on parents to really monitor those hours to get that work done.
I think one of the things we've been sort of surprised to hear about is we just assume that kids are so oriented towards the video stuff that this is going to be pretty easy. And what we've been hearing from parents is that some kids love it, some kids hate it, and that the reasoning for each kid is really different. That I think is sort of, so that's, I guess, one of the things I might want to suggest to parents too, is that if your kid says they hate it, can you either watch them or ask them or talk to them about what it is about the, you know, if it's a video classroom, what's so difficult for them? Because we've heard lots of different reasons why that could be so, and it was I don't know, that was pretty surprising to me.
Definitely. Yeah. So in order to kind of get kids ready to learn or get kids in this kind of right context to be learning, I like to use this kind of sports analogy, right? We don't just jump into a soccer game and run right from the car, right? We have to get our cleats on, we have to get our, you know, our shin guards on, we have to get our jersey on, we warm up first. So the same holds true for school, right? Kids don't just jump into learning right when they get to school every morning. They have a routine, right? They put their backpacks in their cubbies, they turn in their homework, they might, you know, grab a little, you know, fun activity to do, like a word search or something, right? And this routine, this kind of procedure gets kids ready to sit and learn new content and to produce work. And so it's important. We don't have to, obviously, we're not going to have the same elaborate routine as a classroom would have, but to have some little thing that we can do, a couple of steps that will help get kids in the right mindset, to be learning and to be ready. So we want to make sure definitely that our space is clear, right? We don't have the action figures on the desk. We don't have a phone out, you know, if that's something your child has. We want to make sure that all of our materials are present, right? If you're doing your math homework, that you have your math folder or your math book or, you know, your calculator, whatever materials you need. And we want to make sure that our brains aren't distracted by a thought in the moment, right? Which is that really difficult piece for inattention. We want to make sure that our brains are clear, that our brains are ready to learn. So we might try a couple of deep breaths. We might try a little stretching routine, something to help our bodies remember that it's time to sit and focus and learn. All right, so this is, I think, probably one of the hardest, but also probably one of the most beneficial, is having a special place to work. So if you're lucky enough to live, you know, in somewhere where you have a lot of space, it may be easy to find a kind of designated, part of a room, a corner, or a whole room, whatever you might have. And it may be really difficult if you're living somewhere that's much smaller or has, a lot of people kind of crammed into one space. This can be really challenging. But if there's any way that a child can have a spot where they complete homework that has as few distractions as possible, and the best thing would be is if your kid has a space that isn't used for other stuff, right? Like a desk in their room, and we can clear it off and just say, this is your school desk. You know, you may have used it for other stuff before, but it's going to just now be school. And we're not going to do anything else at our desk. We're just going to work on our, take our Zoom classes and do our worksheets or whatever it is. If you can't do that, try to think about if there's a kind of visual signal that you can have at the place where your kid is going to be doing work that signals kind of work time versus other time, right? If there's nowhere else for your child to work other than at the dining room table, see if we can, put out a clock or put out a special object on the table that signals like, all right, this is school time now, and this dining room table has been converted for right now into just school time. And those contextual reminders are really important. Like Steph was saying at the, about the pat down when you see the door, right? We want to try to pair focus and concentration with something in the environment that's telling us it's time to focus. The other thing I think, hopefully a lot of these kids are having kind of interactive, hopefully your child is having some interactive piece of their school day, they're having a meeting with their teacher or something like that. But if not, if they only have independent work, see if you can set aside a time every day for them to do that work. And if they do have those meetings with a teacher, see if you can have a time either right before or right after that's designated for that independent work. So generally speaking, our kids with ADHD are focused much better in the mornings. So if you can have, if their Zoom class is 9 to 10 and they can get their work done from 8 to 9 every morning, see if we can make that really consistent for them. And then the next thing, that we have is often like we were saying, for kind of checklists of routines for getting out of bed in the morning or something like that, making everything visual, right? So you don't want to have to be going over every 2 minutes and saying, okay, now it's your math time. Where's your math work, right? Where do you find your math work? Is it on Google Classroom? Is it on, Canvas? Is it on Blackboard? It'd be way easier, right, to just have that posted. Math is Google Classroom, right? Or English is, a packet that the teacher sent us. And that way your child has more independence, right, in getting their work done, and relies less on you to kind of manage that part for them. So this, I think, is important for every kid, but particularly for kids with ADHD, is we want to definitely build in as breaks. Breaks are really important to refresh attention, and also to give their brains and bodies a time to kind of go out, right? To kind of be inattentive, be hyperactive, get out some of that energy. So the ideal thing is to not wait until your kid needs a break, because by then probably people are not super happy and getting a little frustrated, but to build in these kind of proactive breaks. So if you have a younger child, they probably can't work for more than 7 or 8 minutes, right? A middle-aged kid, so like in 5th or 6th grade, a child with ADHD might be able to work for 10 to 15 minutes. There's a lot of research suggesting that even adults can't work for more than 45 to 50 minutes without needing a break. And our attention naturally wanes, right?
Oh, it's going out again. So Yvonne, you're out. We lost you again.
Sorry about that.
You said our attention wanes was the last thing I think I heard you say.
Okay, sorry. So, our attention naturally wanes. As adults, we might kind of try to push through that, but there's no need for kids with ADHD to push through. We can just schedule in a break for them, give them 2 minutes to go run around or play with a Lego or play an instrument, draw a picture. I think the only thing that I recommend to parents is try to make the break something that they can transition away from, right? So if your kid gets really stuck on video games, probably taking a break playing a video game is not a good idea, because then you're going to have to get away from the video game, right? Shift away from that, and that will be really challenging. And then I think this is our last kind of tip for homeschooling is, a lot of times we'll find with kids with ADHD that get really overwhelmed by all the things that they have to do. That can feel really tough. It can feel really, really like a lot. And so laying things out in a checklist where they can really cross off, I did that one, and see the progression can be really helpful. And that will help them feel more accomplished and also help them calm down, right? Help them do the schoolwork without as much of the negative emotions, the frustration or the irritation of having to do the work, because you can really see like, hey, look at that, you already got 2 of your 10 things done today. That's awesome. You only have 8 more. And that helps them, I think, maintain some of that motivation to keep working.
I think the other thing I would do with that too is when you do that, even put breaks in for your checklist, because this is sort of the ongoing thing. I think some kids will see 10 things and let's go, I can't do that, 10 things is too many. But if you break it up and you have 5 things that they're supposed to do in the morning and 5 things in the afternoon or whatever, 5 seems a little more manageable than 10, even though it may not even be that long. But in terms of optics, I think optics are really important. Again, as Yvonne was saying, visual stuff is really important keys for kids, but to make it look doable is really important too. Okay. The next thing we're going to talk about, before we talk about kids, how to manage kids, we're going to talk about parents, because I think they're really, I did a thing on working with your kids with anxiety last week. That was my webinar for last week. And one of the things that everybody talks about, and then this great visual thing that my partner found, was the picture of, like when you're in the airplane and they're going through the instructions about, what to happen if the plane goes down. Make sure you put the oxygen on you first before you help anyone else, because the fact is, if you wait, you're going to pass out and then you can't help out anybody. And it's the same thing with parenting self-care. If you don't take care of yourself, there's no way that you can take care of your kids, especially when you have really challenging kids. So one of the first things that I think is really, really important is take a deep breath. Now, that's sort of that's a very trite thing to say, but there's a couple of different really important reasons for that. And one of them is just biological. When you take a deep breath, it's turning on the calming part of your system. It's your parasympathetic nervous system, and it makes everything sort of relax more. And when you relax more, you can think better. And that taking a deep breath also gives you that extra minute to think. So before something comes out of your mouth that you really wish you hadn't said, you just get a chance to think through, what is it that I want to say right now? What's really important? Okay, take a deep breath. I think if anything, that's the one thing I would always do. There's nothing that's not true. There are very few things that you need to react to in lightning quick time, okay? Most things, you don't have to, right? And it's always time to take a deep breath. The second thing is, it's really important for you. You cannot be taking care of everybody all day long and if you don't take care of yourself, you've got to have time for yourself. Because after a while, you just get burnt out. I mean, you can't do it. So scheduling in downtime for yourself, that can be alone time, fun time, whatever works for you, and everybody's sort of different. My downtime is reading. So it's really important for me to just take a time where I can read my book for like 20 minutes to half an hour a day. But whatever works for you. Another is to set really clear boundaries. It's not, again, no interrupting during work phone calls or when you're in the bathroom, for crying out loud. Really, the bathroom should be a place where people get to be alone, right? And that's really hard. I think you've got little kids, it takes a long time to sort of train them. But that's really important to set those kind of boundaries. Take timeouts when you need them. This is good modeling for your kids. So what I'm saying is, when you're about to lose it, because you have told this kid 3 different times in 5 different ways, they need to get their homework done, they need to finish this up before they go, and you're just about to, you really can't hold yourself back anymore. Now's the time to take a break. And what you can say is, you can say, look, I am getting really frustrated with you right now because I've told you several times that you need to do X, Y, and Z. So I am going to go take a break for 5 minutes until I can calm down and I can think through, and we can work through how we're going to do this together. Because right now I can't, I don't want to get too angry, and I'm not able to do that right now. So you walk away, you take your break, and then you come back and go, okay, I feel better now. What are we going to do about this? Because you know what, this is not working when you don't do what I tell you to do, and we have to get ready for dinner. getting support from people around who understand what you're up against. Now, this is not your neighbor who's got the world's best kid who never does anything wrong and always sort of looks at you like, what's wrong with your kid? This is from someone who really gets it. This is from another parent who's also got a kid like yours. This can be from your mother. Your mother went through the same thing with you. It can be, but someone who's in your corner and knows you and knows you're a wonderful person and knows you're doing the best you can and can just say, yeah, you know what? You did the best you can, or, you know, yeah, you really blew it on that one. You'll be okay tomorrow. You'll do better tomorrow. And then again, talking with your partner, working with your partner together to working on doing this together. Something again that my husband and I we learned the hard way. We really had to tag team. So, you know, one parent would be in there trying to fight the good fight, and they would get really frustrated. And it was the other, you know, when the other parent saw that, it was our turn to come in and step in and help the other parent take a break. You know, just because you can't do it all the time, you need each other to help each other out. And you know, if you can spell each other, that's really the best way to do it. Okay, so now we're going to talk about effective parenting strategies. Now, effective communication. All right, so this is really, really, really big. And if there's nothing else that we can get through to you, this is really important, because what ends up happening, too many times we know what we're supposed to be doing in our head, but as we get frustrated and upset and feel, you know, put upon and dumb because we can't make this work, these are the things that we forget. Kids are most likely to listen to you when they are looking at you. And there's the main thing for that is that a lot of times they're not paying attention. What you think is important to pay attention to and what your kids think are important to pay attention to are two entirely different things. So unless they're looking at you, you can't really make sure that they're actually paying attention to you. Even when they're looking at you, sometimes they don't. But you know, and when they're looking at you, it used to be, Anthony, look at me. And then I was always a whole lot more effective that way. When you're speaking in a calm voice. Now, the yelling thing. Here's the thing, is that I used to have a thing called 3 strikes and you're out, which was if I asked my kids calmly 3 times, you know, then that was it. Then I didn't have to be as patient anymore. And that was really kind of dumb, actually, because what happened was they weren't paying attention the first 3 times, because at that point I hadn't learned to have them look at me first. And so the first time they heard me was when I was yelling, not the 3 times I asked them before. And then it was like, what are you yelling at me for? You're always against me. You hate me, you know, and they weren't at all listening. Because yelling at someone just makes them feel attacked. And when you feel attacked, you go into like survival, you know, to fight, flight, or fight mode. You're not going to be listening. You're going to be being defensive. They're not going to be hearing what you have to say. Another really important thing, and this is something I think a lot of us parents, especially as like really highly educated parents do, is we talk too much, okay? So it's really important to when we talk to our kids, to keep it short and sweet. They ask you a question about the COVID-19 crisis, answer the question, don't go on forever and ever. They don't want to hear the whole story. They just want to hear the basic, you know, the question that they asked you. If they want to know more, they'll ask you more. So keep it short and sweet. And if you're giving directions, give only 1 to 2 steps at a time. And then finally, when you finish with what you have to say, ask them to tell it back to you so you can make sure they heard what you wanted them to hear, okay? You know, that you didn't want them to go like and do all the laundry in the house. You just wanted to take the laundry basket up to the top of the stairs. And then the final thing is, they will listen to you better when they realize that when they listen to you, you're really into them, and it makes them feel better. So you give them lots and lots of praise for listening, and give them specific feedback that you're a wonderful kid, but when you took the care of the laundry like I asked you to and took it to the top of the stairs the first time I asked, it was such a relief for me, because it was one less thing for me to do, and I knew I could count on you, and I thank you so much for helping. So you're being praising, but you're also being it wasn't that you were a wonderful, what's being a wonderful kid? Who knows what a wonderful kid is? You helped me with the laundry that I was trying to get done and I couldn't get done by myself. That's really important. Another thing that parents, especially parents with kids with ADHD, hear all the time is behavioral reinforcement and behavioral management. And that sounds like such an easy thing to do, and it's really not that easy. My husband thinks that he's really good at behavior management, and the joke in our family is that he's the world's biggest marshmallow. And so, you know, he has his other ways of being effective as a parent, but behavioral reinforcement really wasn't one of them. I don't know if you're hearing me. He can't hear me right now. So anyways, the bottom line of behavioral management is you reinforce whatever you reinforce whatever you pay attention to. If you're paying attention to the bad stuff, you're going to get bad stuff. You pay attention to the good stuff, you're going to get good stuff. Okay. So the bottom line is you pay attention to desirable behavior, which are things you want your kid to do, and ignore insofar as possible undesirable behavior. So, Julie, what a good idea it is. What a nice idea it is for you to draw pictures for our first responders. Nice thing. Not, ignore the fact that he's lying on the kitchen floor and that he might be right where you're trying to do dishes and stuff like that. Whatever, But he's doing a nice thing, right? That's good. We want nice things for our kids. If at all possible, redirect undesirable behavior without putting a value on it. Oh, you're making, in this situation I just gave it, you're drawing pictures through the window. Here, let me help you get you set up over there on the table. It's easier than lying on the floor. Okay, rather than, would you get out of my way? I mean, can't you see I'm trying to empty the dishwasher? And then if you need to intervene, do it quickly without limited fuss. Okay, so Joey, get away from the store, it's not safe, the stove. If this is the kids trying to pin the picture up over the open flame and stuff like that. You can talk about later why you needed to do that, but just do it, get it over with. Don't make a big deal of it. Just, okay, let's get out, it's being safe. And then later talk about why that's important. So we're going to have an opportunity for you to ask questions. I hope you have questions. I think most of the time there's lots of questions around this stuff because we've thrown a fair amount of information at you. But before we do that, I want to just sort of point out some of the NESCA resources that we have. One is that we have some, I got to brag. We have really cool people who work for us, and they're really good writers, and they love kids, and they know a lot about what some of the parents are up against, and they do really, really good blogs. And that's on our NESCA news and notes. You can see it, the link is up here, and you can also, we can send that to you if you'd like. It's filled with all kinds of tips and advice, perspectives. One of the things that have been really popular actually is our occupational therapist did a thing on how to develop a visual schedule. So that's been hugely popular. But people have all kinds of things they've been writing about. The second thing is that these webinars that we're doing are available on YouTube and Facebook Live. So if you want to see one, if you couldn't see all of us, you had to leave, you want to come back, you can get them through those medias. We are also sort of retooling a little bit, since right now it's not a time we can be doing neuropsych evaluations. So now we're sort of turning our focus a little more to stuff that we can do with teleconferencing. And one of the things that actually neuropsychologists are pretty good at is doing a lot of executive function coaching for both adolescents and parents. And so we're also doing, since many of us also have a lot of clinical background, we're also doing teletherapy for children and teens, as well as parent guidance for families. If you're interested in any of that stuff, there's a link here for our online intake form. And this material is also available on our website, which is NESCA-Newton.com. Right? Okay. And finally, if you need help and you need it more quickly, there are a number of different free resources that you can access. The first is Parents Helping Parents. And this is a really wonderful group of volunteers that provide support groups for parents. And during the COVID-19 crisis, they're running a couple of different online groups on weekdays. And you can also reach them at the website. The Parents Helping Parents also run the Parental Stress Line, and that's a free and confidential hotline for parents who are feeling overwhelmed and are afraid of how they're acting with their kids. And then finally, HelpPro.com is a free online therapy finder service that can help you match your need, location, and insurance with therapists in your area. And again, the link is right here.
And a lot of therapists these days are doing remote work, so
yeah.
That's a really nice benefit.
Yeah, and we're getting better at it. I mean, it's very clear this is the way we're going to have to go for a while anyways, especially in the Boston area. Definitely. So I think that's it. This is again, the information is right here as well. My name and Yvonne's name and how to get in touch with this. Excuse me.
So the question I saw was around some book recommendations. So there are definitely a lot of books out there on ADHD. I think I'll say the couple that come to mind, and then I don't know, Steph, if you want to jump in.
I'm going to actually go grab some.
Okay, great. So I really like the ADHD. What's it? I'm going to blank out on the name, the executive functioning coaching books. And I am going to find them for you right now, since my brain is a little on this crisis. I'm not working as well as it normally does. There we go. So Russell Barkley is the name I could not think of. He has a lot of books on executive functioning and ADHD, and then the Smart But Scattered series is really helpful in figuring out kind of how your kids' brains might be working and how to get them a little bit more organized. If you're looking for behavior management books, I really like these series by Ross Green. So he has a couple of different ones, The Explosive Child, he has Lost at School, and then I like some of the Alan Kasdan books also. And these are books that we can certainly, if you want to send us an email and whatever, we can certainly give you some more specifics. Which ones do you have there, Steph?
I have, this is called Finally Focused. This is actually a book that my niece sent me because she was just tearing out her hair with her first grader who has ADHD and some learning issues. And she was again, I don't know how, I can't even like do this. And she really liked this book. She thought it was really helpful. It was very concrete. It sort of explains to do a lot of the strategies that need to be learned. That was one. This is actually more for adults. So, and because the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. If your kid's got ADHD, it's a good chance that like either you or your husband or your partner have ADHD as well. So maybe it's called The Disorganized Mind. It's coaching your ADHD brain to take control of time, tasks, and talents. And it's by Nancy Rady. And John Rady and Ned Hallowell were the guys who came up with the original books. And so it's a very good book. I really like it. Another book I think is really helpful for parents is called No More Meltdowns. And this isn't specifically about ADHD, but it's sort of managing and preventing out of control behavior. So when your kid loses it in the grocery store, for instance. And it's by Jed Baker. And I haven't read this all yet, but I hear that it's a really great book. So that's the ones that I would suggest at this point. So do we have other questions?
That's the only one that I saw.
Okay, there was one question that came in earlier today, and we wanted to make sure to address it. And that's a question of, so this was someone who said that their child had been diagnosed with ADHD this year and was on concerted from Monday through Fridays. But during the at-home quarantine, the child was no longer using the medication, and it was okay during the school sessions, and he was mostly getting stuff done, but what do we think about that? And Yvonne and I both, the first thing we need to say is neither of us are medical doctors. We don't prescribe drugs. So the first thing you would need to do is go and talk to your doctor about it. But I would think that there are a couple thoughts I would just suggest to talk to the doctor about. One is that Concerta is a stimulant. It's a Ritalin derivative. It's a long-acting drug. And I think, well, there are two things. One is that some parents think that they're doing their kid a favor if they only have them on the drug from Monday through Fridays. But the fact of the matter is that the ADHD doesn't stay at school. It comes home as well. And I wonder sometimes if parents they might be seeing a whole side of their kid they don't get to see very often if that kid also used the stimulant on the weekends as well. As I think what happens with stimulants is they give you like a millisecond more time before you react, and that a lot of good things can happen then. And another, so my other point I was going to make about that. Oh shoot, I hate this when my brain just fogs up. In terms of, well, we'll stop at that. Do you have anything else to suggest, Yvonne, about the medication issue?
No, I think that that's really important. And the other piece is just thinking about kind of risks and benefits. If medication is something that your child feels really bad about, like I don't like having to take this, then talking to the doctor about I want to try to empower them. I want to try to see they want to try this, and I want to support them in that. And versus, you know, if your kid is a kid who's really sensitive and you know, behaves impulsively and then starts to get really upset, and the medication kind of breaks that cycle a little bit, you know, that's a different piece, you know, that's a different kind of situation that you're talking about. So really thinking about what does the medication do for your kid, and then what are the kind of risks that you are concerned about with it, and making sure to raise that with, you know, with the doctor. So don't just ask, you know, can they come off of it, but really making sure to kind of lay out what you're thinking and what you're thinking the benefits or risks could be of stopping the medication for now.
Yeah, and what I was thinking was, I was remembering my son had been on, I think he went on when he was just turned 6. And it was, for safety reasons, because he was one of those really hyperactive kids. When he got to the middle school, he wanted to try it without it. And we talked about it for a while, and we decided that we would try. I think it was either in 7th or 8th grade. And so he went for a semester without the medication. And he decided that he wanted to go back on. And what he said was, I can do it, it's just so much harder. And so, you know, and for him, he just said, you know what, why kill myself? If the medication helps me, I don't always like, you know, it's not great to have to take it, but it helps me sort of get through school and get my work done faster. And why just sort of kill myself when I don't have to? And so he continued to do that. And he, as an adult, he's no longer using it. But he, again, went through the same kind of process of always sort of just, that's the great thing about the medications, is that they're short acting, they're very short acting. So they're in, they're out, it's done. You can take chances like that. And I think at some point for most kids, most teenagers, it's really important for them to try it, to see if it works, if they're willing to do the extra work they need to do without it, or if it's just better for them. So
yeah, I see a question that really relates to that stuff. So someone's asking about getting stomach aches from Concerta. And again, just as a disclaimer, we're not medical doctors. So if you are concerned, please do go see your physician or prescriber. But anecdotally, yes, definitely. What a lot of these stimulants do is they activate a part of the nervous system that constricts your digestive system. And so getting stomach aches, not feeling hungry, those are really common things that we'll hear as side effects. And like Steph was saying, some of the side effects may be things that you want to bring up with your doctor as a reason to stop it for a little while and trial it. You know, sort of, you know, we're getting a lot of side effects. Andy's not in school. Like, do you think this is something we can try stopping for right now?
And I think it's also, medicine is still more of an art than a science. I mean, although some of the pharmacogenetic testing is really helping in some ways, the new DNA testing that they can do but it's really I don't think they've really had much luck in the terms of looking at it with stimulants and stuff, but it's again a doctor's experience. Is how much he's seen with kids, how many. That's why it's important to at least start with a neurologist rather than your pediatrician. Once you get the right medicine in the right dose, I think a pediatrician can maintain it. But that knowing and trying which two things do they think might work and how much do you think it might take. Because you want to use as least amount as you can, and that's really a pediatric neurologist is the person who can.
Yeah, so I see one more question. Someone who lives out in DC. We would certainly love to do any remote counseling. So they're asking about, if it's better to use us or use local services. I think that's totally a personal call. Right now with everything being remote, I think that it's really easy to access these kinds of further away specialists, and so we would certainly love to hear from you. If you do want testing, that's sometime in the future, that's probably something that you're going to want to find locally instead of driving all the way up to Boston from DC. But certainly any of the coaching or telehealth services that we offer, we're more than happy to work with anyone across the country.
And also, I think if people want to have, if they're looking for people closer to them, I think we'd be glad to help point them in the right direction if we have contacts or whatever down there. So it's really
awesome.
kind
of. And I see one more, Steph. Any books for teens adjusting to and understanding their own ADHD? Not sure I know of ones. I think some of the adult books are written really well. Some of the Ed Hollowell books, like you were talking about, can be really nice for that. I don't know if you have.
There's a Patricia Quinn and oh God, what's her name? She and her collaborators have written a couple of books on ADHD and adolescence, and they're there's some new versions that are out now. I'm trying to remember the name of our collaborator, and I can't remember it. But one of the one's name is Patricia Quinn. And those are pretty good. I think the other thing that happens when you get kids, adolescents, we're talking about, again, the brain is developing, as Yvonne talked about, and what's coming online in adolescence is really more the executive function stuff. So in some ways, and that's sort of an inextricable part of ADHD as well. And so there's a lot of stuff that's coming out about executive function and supports around that. And then that's why, many of the books are written for adolescents around those issues as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I see one more question, and then we'll probably, are we wrapping up soon, Jane, or?
Yeah, I think we have
we are.
a couple more questions. One was about whether or not we're doing webinars regarding remote learning and dyslexia. And actually, that is one of the topics that we have been talking about. So keep an eye out on our Facebook page for that event to come down the pike. And then there's just another question about sort of repairing that relationship with your teen with ADHD, sort of how you've sort of lost it and how do you kind of get it back.
Yeah, I see that. So, first, that's a really tough situation to be in for sure. And I think, like Steph was saying, adolescence is a difficult time because we really expect big jumps in a lot of these skills that kids with ADHD lack. And also because developmentally they're supposed to be pulling away a little bit, and it can really, add to a fracture in a relationship when we're already hitting a point, where we're sort of supposed to be shifting away from the family a little bit, and to have that added stress of a kid with ADHD and then, feeling like you've broken that is really difficult. I think one thing to do, that is really difficult, but was really helpful for me, certainly as a teacher, and I think, Steph, you can certainly speak to it as a parent, is to own as much of it as you feel comfortable and confident with your kid, saying like, I really shouldn't have said that, I'm really sorry about that. I think that probably really hurt your feelings. And I think sometimes when we can sort of dig deeper and come out with our own really honest feelings of regret or grief about what we did, I think that can set the stage for a kid to be ready to engage with us again. And the other thing I think is time is, putting that out there, saying, wow, I really shouldn't have done that. And when you're ready, when you feel safe and comfortable, like I want to, try to make this right. I don't know if you have thoughts about that, Steph.
Yeah, I think that's a really great idea. I think the other thing is to find ways that you can connect around things that mutual things that you love or care about or feel passionate about. I mean, even though it's just like little things, little areas that you can sort of carve out for yourself. I know that my daughter and I really, 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 I mean, girls and mothers and girls is just incredible. It's incredibly difficult. There's no more intense relationship in the whole wide world. And so it provides a very fertile area for me saying stupid things and things you really wish you hadn't and whatever. And I remember the one, and I always sort of blew me away. The one thing my daughter always asked me for and I could help her was with her writing. She wanted me to go over her writing because she had mild dyslexia, not really bad, had become a pretty good reader, but she couldn't spell to save her life. And she was always just, she just wanted someone to check her spelling. And in the times that we weren't talking or we're just like looking at each other like with the evil eye through most of the time, she let me help her with her writing, and I could help her with her writing, and we just let it go. And that was this little place that we kind of built our relationship back around, I think. And it was really important. So just finding those little tiny areas, again, I said this is more of a parenting thing, but my family is Irish Italian. My dad was Irish, and of course, wakes and stuff like that are really important. And that was a really important thing. And he really took it very seriously. But my mother hated to go to wakes with him. And I remember at one point as in my relationship, we're at one of his worst point, he said, Stephanie, would you please come to this wake with me? Because I really hate going to them alone. And I just want to have, and your mom will come. Would you just come with me? You don't have to like say anything, just be there. And I was like, wow, that was really cool. I mean, it was like weird, but it was like that I felt so honored that he asked for my help. you know, that I could be helpful to him in some way. We didn't really talk about it all, but it was just like, it was like this really nice, those are the kind of islands that you want to build, I think, in your relationship with your kids when you're going through those really tough adolescent times. You can have these little islands of connection that can be really helped through all the hurt. And there's a lot of hurt. So, are we done?
I think so. So somebody asked about the slides, and the webinar is going to be up on our Facebook Live and YouTube if you do want to access the slides at any point in the future.
Yes, and for anyone who did participate, we'll be sending an email out with the link to the webinar on YouTube. All right, so thanks so much for everybody who joined.
Thank
we
you.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yes,
And,
thank you all.
Stay safe.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Oops.